pile of parts on my table can only mean one thing. Some of you are about to spend a lot of money. Today's video is brought to you by Maximum Settings Cloud Gaming. This is a gaming PC, but it's not exactly portable. This is also a gaming PC, but it's not exactly powerful. What if you could turn any device you already own into a PC as powerful as this, while being as portable as this? With Maximum Settings Cloud Gaming, you get access to a powerful gaming PC in the cloud from basically any device you already own. For example, here's Helldivers 2 running on an Ein Odin Lite Android handheld. Here's Cyberpunk 2077 running on my phone. Virtualized gaming machines start at just $9.95 Canadian, or around $7.40 US, and you'll be up and gaming just a few minutes after creating your account. Or for uncompromised performance, opt for bare metal access with an AMD 7800X3D CPU and a Radeon RX 7900 XT graphics card. Get the flexibility of a cloud gaming system without the hassle of building and maintaining one yourself. Visit MaximumSettings.com or visit the link down in the video description to get started today. And again, thanks to Maximum Settings Cloud Gaming for sponsoring today's video. Welcome back to Craft Computing, everyone. As always, I'm Jeff, and oh yeah, I'm at it again. So on my table today is a brand new to me server. This is the Tyan GT86C, a 1U highly dense storage server that some might recognize as the spiritual successor to the Chenbro NR12000. Now that's a server that I reviewed about 2 years ago, and it was a massive success here on the channel, as it was a 1U server that held a full 12 3.5-inch hard drives. This one is definitely of the same ilk, having the same 12 3.5-inch bay capacity. However, this one runs a slightly newer architecture. This has a single LGA 3647 socket supporting either first or second generation Xeon Scalable processors. That would be Skylake or Cascade Lake. The really cool part is just how affordable this server is. This server cost me just $202 shipped to my door straight from eBay. Inside the box is a fairly small package when it comes to the motherboard. Again, we've got that single LGA 3647 socket flanked by 12 DIMM slots with 6-channel support for DDR4 registered ECC memory. That should be no surprise that most of the real estate inside of this chassis is taken up by the 12 3.5-inch drive bays. Now, the nice thing about this server is they actually included all of the sleds and the screws for the hard drives, so installing them once you get this out of the box should be no problem at all. Thank you, Stormy. Hey, You know, you guys are making it really difficult to work today. Do you know that? I'm sitting here trying to work. Yeah. Now I did notice, oh, nope, that's my beer. All of those drive trays also have a dedicated backplane behind them, so there's no having to run individual cables throughout the server. That is a really nice touch inside of here. However, I did encounter one downside. While the backplanes themselves are SAS compatible, the controller on the motherboard is SATA only. So if you wanted to run SAS drives, you're going to need to run a secondary controller on the PCI Express X16 slot in here. Yes, Shadow. Well, if you want pets, you can come over too. Well, come on. Everyone, meet the girls. Girls? This is everyone. Yeah. Life's been a little busy this month. This is Stormy, and this is Shadow. Can I set you down yet? Okay. Ready? Here we go. According to the documents that I found for the Tyan GT86, this does have also two 2.5-inch SATA SSD bays. However, I could only locate one of them in my particular server, and there's actually only one SATA cable ran to that bay as well. I know there is a second SATA slot on this board, but I couldn't find a second place to mount a second SSD. And finally, for a power supply, we've got a very basic 500-watt 1U unit. And now there is a little bit of bad news on the server itself. Number one, it was shipped to me a little bit damaged. Both of the ears were actually flexed in. This one I was able to bend back. This one is bent almost flush with the side of the chassis, so we're going to have to see if we can bend that out a little bit. But I bought the server thinking that I was going to be able to find some sliding rails for it. I have not been able to track down rails for this particular server yet. Now, it did come with the actual slider pieces on the side of the server, which is kind of a bonus. I had assumed that since this is essentially a Chenbro chassis made by Tyan, that I might be able to use some of my NR12000 rails or maybe some other similar chassis rails that I've had on these servers before. But none of my existing rails fit. So if anyone out there has dealt with this particular Tyan server before and you happen to know the part number for the rails, I am all ears. Pun intended. Now, given the low price of the server, I wanted to keep the majority of the internals pretty basic. So we went with an Intel Xeon 6132. This is a 14-core, 28-thread CPU with a base clock of 2.6 GHz and an all-core turbo of 3.7. This is based on Skylake, so Intel 6th generation. Not necessarily the most performant, but with 14 cores should get us more than enough for a file server and maybe a couple basic virtual machines. Best of all, the CPU was just $21 on eBay. With that theme of keeping costs somewhat manageable, we went with just 4 32GB sticks of DDR4 registered ECC 2133. Now, this is not the most performant memory, and we are going with just 4 sticks on a 6-channel motherboard. However, again, for a basic file server, a basic virtualization server, 128 gigs is going to be more than enough for our targets here. Now, one downside to this platform is it actually doesn't have any M.2 slots on board. Tyan, in their official documentation, does advertise that you can add up to 4 M.2 cards, but that's basically via a generic expansion card. Now, I happened to pick up a 10G-Tech 4 NVMe carrier board. This was only about $20 on Amazon, and a riser card, which was about another $10 on top of that. It is not the right fit, but it does fit. I'll show you in just a minute. Since we only have that one 2.5-inch SATA SSD drive to work with, and I like to run redundant drives for my boot disks, I went with 2 Intel M10 Optane SSDs. These are only 16 gigabytes in size, but they are virtually indestructible when it comes to boot drives. Plus, they're only about $5 a piece on eBay right now. Links down in the video description for this and everything else that I'm using in this build. And for virtualization storage, we're going to go with 2 Team Group T-Create Gen 3x4 NVMe drives. These are 2 1TB disks, and we'll run them in a basic mirror. Throwing all concept of budget out the window, I've been rearranging some of my hard drives out in my main NASs, and these ones are in between deployments right now. So we are going to go with 8 Seagate Exos X20 20TB SATA SSDs. The reason these got chosen instead of some other disks that I have on hand is these are the only SATA disks that I had on hand in any relevant quantity. I was planning on using some SAS disks in here, but obviously with the onboard controller, I'm not able to do that. So SATA was the only choice. These drives have plummeted in price as of late, though. You can get these X20s for as low as about $220 on Amazon. $220 brand new for a 20 terabyte spinning disk. That's kind of insane. Now, 8 of these drives together is still about $1,800. So again, we're not really considering the budget when it comes to testing out the hard drive bays on here. But for $1,800, that's still 160 terabytes of raw storage. That's still kind of a crazy deal. And that should about wrap it up for all the parts that we're working with today. The server itself did come with a heatsink mounted to the board already, so we should be able to mount up our CPU and then slap that stock heatsink right on top of it. And this board does have a mezzanine slot with a 10 gigabit adapter already installed, so networking, we are more than set as well. I think that should about do it for the introductions. What do you say we get this thing together?
Thank you.
5. Yeah. Hey! Hey! It is a new day, and a huge thanks to Little Bit for her help putting this all together. Overall, there weren't any real problems getting this all assembled and up and running. I really like the drive tray design, as all the screws are captive and the trays easily slide in and out of the chassis with no real struggle. The BIOS for this board is pretty unremarkable, but every option you can think of is present and pretty clearly labeled. The only one with a bit of difficulty I had finding was the setting for PCI Express bifurcation, which was actually under the CPU socket options. Not the most intuitive of places, but easy enough to find once you know where to look. To show off the potential versatility of this box, I went ahead and installed Proxmox as a virtualization host. The main reason was I wanted to see if PCI Express pass-through was going to work, specifically for the onboard SATA controller, and I'm happy to report that yes, pass-through worked exactly as expected. I was able to create a TrueNAS VM and pass through the onboard Intel SATA controller. There are 2 SATA controllers on this board, one for the 12 channels that run the drive trays that are up front, and the second controller for the onboard SATA ports for the 2 2.5-inch SSD slots near the power supply. Or I guess in my case, the 1 SSD slot near the power supply. One thing that did surprise me was how quiet this server was able to run. 1U servers really aren't known for their friendly acoustics, and this Tyan has 6 40mm blow emitrons driving air through its very long chassis. And while it does scream a bit when it's booting up, or when you start really hammering the CPU, at idle, it's downright tolerable. I wouldn't call it office-friendly still, as it's still pretty high-pitched and far from silent. But if you already run a server rack, this likely won't stand out in any significant way. Also, I really like the baffle over the CPU heatsink here. Normally, 1U servers like this use very thin plastic sheets that have been bent into a relative shape to direct airflow inside of a server. This server actually has a proper molded part that screws into the box, keeping it perfectly in place. Now, this is a more expensive solution to the airflow problem, but it does make the internals feel that much more premium. And now on to a couple oddities I noticed with the system, starting with one that I can't believe I overlooked. There's no onboard network on this motherboard. There is a management port, but that's dedicated for the BMC via the ASPEED AST2500, and it isn't shared with the host machine. The only other network port is the 10 gigabit adapter installed in the mezzanine slot. I really like the fact that the server has 10 gigabit networking on it, especially because I don't need to occupy the PCI Express slot with a network adapter. But if you don't have SFP Plus networking equipment, this platform might be a no-go for you. One other thing worth mentioning is that PCI Express slot. While it does fully support PCI Express bifurcation and IOMMU pass-through, I had issues getting all 4 disks in my NVMe caddy to show up. I'm not sure if that was due to the riser card being a little bit short, the NVMe caddy itself, or a combination of those inside of a server that is designed to use with a custom riser card. But I ran into some issues with this configuration. On the first boot of the server, I got NVMe drives 1 and 3, so I pulled the card out, removed the riser, reseated everything, and reinstalled it. After that, I got NVMe drives 1, 2, and 4. After reseating a third time, I got 1, 2, and 3. A taller riser card is definitely recommended if you want to pick up the server for yourself, as my shorter riser card that I tried to use definitely has some problems maintaining connectivity. I wound up just leaving it with just 3 out of the 4 drives connected for testing, but would definitely like to source an official riser card for the server to make it a bit more stable. And finally, power usage was actually very impressive, even with 8 hard drives installed. At idle, I'm sitting right around 110 watts, and in fact, the highest wattage draw that I observed was 192 watts measured directly from the wall. Now, I will say I wasn't necessarily putting a full load on this server, that was just installing the OS and running through my VM configurations, but 192 watts for a 1U storage server is pretty impressive to say the least. It's a very solid result if you're looking for a fairly efficient home lab or small-medium business storage server. Overall, I really do like the Tyan GT86C as a package. It's got support for first and second generation Intel Xeon Scalable CPUs, which means 24 or even 28 core CPUs are not only possible, but fairly affordable. And opting for a second generation Gold CPU or higher means that Intel Optane DIMMs are an option if you need a ton of memory. 10 gigabit networking and an available PCI Express X16 slot means you get a decent amount of expandability in a pretty small 1U package, although it is a very long 1U package. Keep that in mind. It is great, though, for a virtualization or storage server solution. But it's not perfect. There are still some things to consider, like a lack of available rack mount rails. In fact, you can probably add officially supported PCI Express risers to that list as well. Finding a replacement or upgraded parts for this server is going to be a challenge. I searched every model name that I could find on this and didn't find a single compatible part. Also, the onboard storage controller being limited to just SATA disks instead of SAS means more limited options for disks that you can deploy, with SATA often performing slightly worse while being slightly more expensive because of their compatibility with consumer systems. Again, this could be solved by adding a third-party storage card into the PCI Express X16 slot, but it would require you replacing all of the onboard cables, which could get pretty expensive given the length of the cables involved. But overall, I think the Tyan GT86C would make a great addition to a home lab or a small-medium business server, if you're needing a 1U highly dense storage solution. If you're interested in picking up the GT86C for yourself, I will have eBay affiliate links down in the video description, as well as links to everything else that I used in today's build. Again, those are affiliate links, and I do get a small kickback if you purchase something with them, which does help keep the lights on around here. Another way to help support the channel is head on over to craftcomputing.store, where I've got everything from bottle openers and coasters to pint glasses and whiskey glasses, and everything is designed and made right here in-house. But that's going to do for me in this one. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next video. Cheers, everyone. Beer for today is from Treehouse Brewing over in Massachusetts. I always want to say Rhode Island because they get sent to me from Rhode Island, but they are actually in Charlton, Massachusetts. Close enough. It is the Prodigal Haze Part 4. It is a triple IPA clocking in at 9%. It's really funny, is I think this one was actually sent to me from Quebec or Montreal. So, thank you. And man, when they say hazy, they mean hazy. Oh my gosh. The Prodigal Haze Part 4 combines Citra, Nelson, Racao, and 2024 Peacherine hops to create a symphony of tropical fruit flavor. Pouring a hazy, deep yellow color into your glass, it explodes on the palate with fresh summer stone fruit, juicy orange, mango nectar, and sweet passion fruit. We find the best beers to be just as enjoyable at the end of your glass as at the beginning. I couldn't agree more with that. And the Prodigal Haze Part 4 embodies this ideal beautifully. Enjoy. This is just great. Hazies can be a little polarizing, especially, this is a little bit more of an old school hazy. This is more of a mid-2010s hazy, when they were first really starting to find their feet, and they had a lot of acid burn. This one has a lot of acid burn, but I think it's just mellow enough, or rather, just not harsh enough, where it is still very, very enjoyable. They say it's stone fruit and citrus, and man, this is like a hopped mimosa, if I had to find a near equivalent to it. Definitely a lot of orange juice. Like, I'm surprised there's not pulp in this. It is so orange juice flavor forward. Yeah, this is we finished brunch and there's just enough champagne left to make another mimosa, and you start the day off by going half and half, and by the end you're doing 3/4 or 4/5 champagne to orange juice. This tastes like a 3/4 champagne. This tastes like a I'm not driving anywhere all afternoon mimosa. All I'm saying is I'm glad I'm home for the day.